This session is about like representing real-world issue through the medium of games. I think nobody can ignore that the game is becoming a huge media. So we're going to look at the impact of those real-world issues on gameplay right now. So welcome Ansh PATEL, who's the founder of Narcissist Reality. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. So this entire talk is going to be a very antithesis of what this entire conference is all about. So this is going to be focusing exclusively on the real-world issues and how do we represent that through the medium of games. I'm Ansh PATEL, and I work under the moniker of Narcissist Reality. So it's just a one-man team. I've been working as a game developer, a part-time game developer for the last year or so. And I consider my specialties to be in the field of programming, shader scripting, and audio production because I used to be a keyboardist before. Also, before I got into game development, I was a game critic, and I had written for various publications and websites, including YouThink, Ill Gaming, and various other things. So before I got into development, I had this kind of real analytical mind on how to actually integrate the medium with different aspects which may not be explored by many other developers. Also, I tend to have really strong opinions about politics and economics and general world affairs. And I think one of the key aspects which I realized about our modern society is that we tend to be very engrossed and self-absorbed about our own lives, about the social media. Example is the best way to represent how self-absorbed we are. So knowing about the world in general and the kind of problems that face the world is an important aspect. And this entire talk is going to be how we can create that kind of awareness and create that kind of understanding about what kind of issues affect our world through the medium of games. So I'm going to be introducing the exact opposite of casual games, serious games. Now, serious games, by their very definition, are not meant to be entertaining or fun. So they are not going to be providing those two things to the players. What they do provide is that they provide the kind of awareness, they express a kind of a message, and in many cases, they also are really realistic virtual simulations which can be used by soldiers, or they can be used by Air Force pilots to train in VR before they can actually carry those things out in the field. They also can be used to create awareness and educate students about issues that affect our world. And they can be used to also create an awareness about an issue. Now, since there may be a lot of you who may be involved in the business aspect of the development, so you may ask that who actually funds these games? The thing about the serious games is that they are very popular among the non-government organizations, the NGOs. So you will see examples, like I'll say in the next slide, where you'll see that a lot of these NGOs commission developers who are acquainted with these kinds of games to make games so that they could use it to spread their message about whatever issues they may be most concerned about. And what isn't serious? I mean, some of us may confuse games which deal with about war games as serious, but war games are not serious because anything that glorifies war in general is not going to be serious because war is nothing to be proud or glorified about. So, and most of the shooters that we play tend to do that. So now, who makes these kind of serious games? So like I said earlier, there are international bodies like Evoke who make these kinds of serious games. They're also very popular in the academic field. The researchers and lecturers from various fields, not just games, from various fields make these things. NGOs, the activist groups who want to rally against certain government policies and want to stir a kind of emotion among the general public. Radical artists, and generally the game designers or developers who are looking to innovate in the aspect which is not explored by the 99% of the industry. On the right, this person, Paolo Pedercini, he is one of the most popular, at least the most well-known artists in serious games industry. He got infamously known when he put Phone Story on the Apple App Store. The Phone Story basically is a message against Apple, and it focused on 3 different stages of smartphone manufacturing, right from how the minerals are dug up in some remote part of Africa, then they are manufactured and compiled in Chinese factories where the workers infamously commit suicide because of the horrible working conditions. And finally, how when the smartphones get used and thrown up, they generate massive piles of e-waste, which countries like America export to smaller third world nations, which end up affecting the health of the people where those smartphone chips and those hazardous waste materials are dumped at. So he made a critique on that, and obviously Apple found out 3 days later, and they removed it from the App Store. And but the damage was done because people really found out that, okay, these things do happen. And that was the kind of a message he wanted to spread, and the kind of resistance which corporates like Apple have towards those kind of truth is he didn't manufacture those things. It was the general truth. Now, from the perspective of game design, how do we approach this serious games? I would like to point a key difference on how we design general games and how we design serious games. In general games, you may come up with a concept or an idea, and you may end up thinking that, okay, I have got an idea, let me select a genre or type of game to fit that in. So you may end up with a platformer or a shooter or a puzzle, anything. But when you select a genre, you are basically restricting yourself from choosing from that particular pool of mechanics. Serious game design differs in that because you think of a concept, you research on it, and so that you do not come up with an uneducated opinion when you make that game. You also try to analyze it, because when you look at one issue from your own eyes, it's just one of the many possible perspectives. So try to get different people's opinions, try to read more about it, try to read contradictory views about it, try to debate among the people you know about it, and then you design, but you design around the concept. That's how serious games differ. They try to convey the message not through the dialogues or not through the story. They try to convey the message that they want to convey through the mechanics. So they have a concept and they design the mechanics around it. And that's basically how they shape not just the mechanics, but also the systems of the games that they make. Now, when you try breaking new ground and try thinking about how do we approach different aspects of games and how do we approach serious games, you have to look at slightly outside the box. You have to think outside the box. And thinking outside the box does not mean you do something entirely different. You have to use the traditional tools. For example, games have the power to place the player in someone else's shoes. Generally, they do not use it for any kind of important real-world impact. But what serious games try to do is that they try to implement something called as perspective shift. Now, that is a really key element which is used to generate empathy, because imagine you're playing as a character who is based on a real-life person, a real-life group of people. And when you play as that, you actually get to experience the world from that person's perspective. And that is something which we in real world can never achieve. So it's a really unique potential of games alone. So when you're playing as someone, when you're playing as that particular character of, say, some African country, which you'll never be able to experience from their own minds. So when you're playing as that person, your conservative barriers, which you may have in real life, they tend to slightly dissipate into a more open mind. The example I've mentioned here is Darfur is Dying. It was made by an activist group, and this basically has you as a child living in a remote village of Sudan, which was infamously known for many genocidal militia who killed people in mass numbers. So you are this child who has to go and fetch water daily, on the daily basis, and you have to somehow avoid meeting these militia. But it's not just a simple stealth aspect, but also how this particular aspect differs from games in general. In games, you're always put in the position of power. You're a soldier. In a strategy game, you're a king. You're a god. So you are always in the position of power. In the serious games, you're generally in the position of helplessness, of powerlessness. So when you have that particular thing, you can really try breaking new ground and try looking at the entire medium from a different perspective. And how do we actually get these things out? So like I said before, do not think within set labels, because when you start designing a game thinking with a specific genre in mind, you're basically limiting yourself in a small room. And that will never help you achieve what you want to achieve with the game itself. And also you have to understand that people who tend to play these kind of games, they may not even come from a gaming background. They may not have the set kind of expectations which gamers in general do. Also, one of the very key aspects of this is that many people try to translate personal experiences. The example on the right is a popular text adventure game called as Depression Quest, which through its purely narrative and text-based story tries to convey really eloquently how a person under depression feels like and how people around him react to that. The game on the right is also currently an in-development game called as That Dragon Cancer. It's made by a father whose child was suffering from cancer, a 3-year-old child, and how the kind of trauma and pain he goes through seeing his own child in pain but not being able to help him. So personal experiences can really be the best kind of inspirations that you can get for games like this, because if you have experienced something, then you can essentially translate that into a really effective and tonally based message. Also, you have to tend to look beyond themes, because when you are designing serious games or games based on real-world issues, themes are really too abstract and broad. So try focusing on a specific issues or two, but do not focus on themes, because themes can be very interpretative, and that means that there is room for the player to interpret your message, and that may sometimes lead to the dilution of the message that you want to convey, or otherwise. What you need to do is that you need to research properly, because this is something which is going to be played by people who you may be making the game about. If you're making a game about the Africans, then you have to research how the people in those villages live their life, what kind of issues they face from their own government or the lack of government. So you should think of those things and not try to belittle them by thinking that I'm making a game about poor people. They may be poor, they may be suffering from a lot of things, but at the end of the day, they're still people and they're still proud of who they are. So do not belittle them, do not demean them. Try to make games which try to create a sort of empathy from the player's mind towards those people. Now, in the next few slides, I'll be giving some of my own examples from the games I have made. Some of them are actual games that I've been making, and some of them are short prototypes. And I'll also be giving some of the more popular examples of these kind of games. The first one, which I'm incidentally showcasing here as well, is Exist. Now, this is a philosophical horror adventure game. But unlike most horror games, the horror doesn't come from monsters or zombies. Here it comes from the society itself. So you are playing as an oppressed person, a character whose identity has been oppressed and suppressed by the society around him. So you face societal prejudice on a daily basis, and it's all conveyed in a really abstract sense. So what you do is you try to, what I tried to do with this game in general was I tried to bring out the inequality that surrounds the world in our real life. For example, let me give you an example. In the game, there's a city which is divided into two parts. There's a rich city and there's a poor city. Now, this is a game where the character you play as is procedurally generated. So you can be born as a poor person. That's not a choice. That's a card that's handed out with you by the God or whoever gives you birth. But what it does is that it restricts you. When you're born poor, you are limited to just being poor. You cannot enter the rich part of the city. If you try, you'll be confronted by gates and walls. And no matter what you do, you can do small quests and try to build a ladder to jump across the wall. But eventually, at some point, the ladder crumbles. This is a critique of the post-precision economy which affects our world. In the economy which is meant to keep the rich richer and the poor poorer, because the entire system is rigged. So that's what I mean by unfair game systems. In any other game, you could explore that rich part of the city by unlocking, by finding an item or by gaining a level or something. But here you cannot, because you're stuck. And you have to answer these philosophical questions by being the person that you are. The next game was a short prototype I developed last year. It was, the theme was basically anti-war, but unlike most war shooters, the soldiers you kill, they resurrect, and they become zombies. But these zombies don't damage you, they just follow you around wherever you go. And the natural player instinct is these are zombies, let me just shoot them. As soon as you shoot them, your bullets reflect back on you. So there's no way of avoiding the guilt of a soldier that you are. Wherever you go, the guilt of each and every person you have killed will follow you back. There's no escape. So this game basically ends with game over. There's no other ending. And its motive was to bring out the post-traumatic stress disorder that many of these soldiers face who have come from various wars. This is a text adventure which I'm currently developing. It's part of a larger text adventure compilation. But this basically it puts you in the role of a character who is exploring this perfect world. And you have to solve a mystery. That mystery is that there's something wrong with this world. So you want to solve that, but with every action you take, the world gets damaged. And not just the world, but also the text structure. Now, here I have showcased a really late stage of the game where the player has made many actions, and the story has become very difficult to even process. So what it tries to convey through these things is that each and everything you do, the humans do, is irreparable. It cannot be redone. The environment tries to warn you in various ways, but it cannot be redone because it's an irreparable thing. These are some of the more popular examples. Like I said before, World Bank commissioned a group of developers to make a game called as Evoke. Evoke was basically an alternate reality game. And it was a game which allowed the players to participate in actual decision making. So what it did was that it gave people these imaginary future scenarios, which are very likely, where the society and the economy collapses because of the issues that we do not properly adhere to or properly are not concerned about. For example, here, in this case, the comic which I've shown, there is an issue of food security. And what happens if we ignore food security for too long? Then at some point, you run out of food, and the food becomes scarce because of all the non-sustainable agricultural practices. And that means that not just the society, but even the economy collapses along with that. So it focuses on a lot of things. If we do not transition to renewable energy resources, then what happens if oil runs out? There will be wars over a small patch of oil. So these things was not just to create awareness about the issues and how horribly they could go bad, but also to explain and also participate gamers or the players into the process. And that's a really key aspect because when you're playing a game, you're really passively, actively involved in it. But when you're designing a game, you actually think consciously about what this actual problem is and how can you possibly solve it. So it's a kind of a self-educational process, which I would like to call. This was made also by Paolo Pedercini. This was just a really short 10 minutes game. It was describing just a day in the life of a remote drone bomber. On the left, he is killing a person remotely. And he's showing the exact same emotion which he's showing while he's watching his son play the video game. So it just shows that in an actual war, a soldier comes face to face with the person he kills. But here, this guy, for him, it's just a blip. It's just a heat signature on the radar. And once he drops the bomb, that heat signature is gone. So it's just one less heat signature, but it's a loss of actual life. This was made by a human rights group, and this basically talks about the injustice that is sorted out, that is treated to the illegal immigrants, and basically focused on the issues of deportation. And also, this lets you play as a variety of teenagers who are living in America. Now, America may be the most diverse society, racially speaking, but also it tends to have a lot of prejudices in it as well. So what this game does is that it tries to create that kind of awareness about the issues that these teenagers face on a regular day-to-day basis as they carry on with their daily routines. And this was a game which McKinney, now this may be slightly ironic since McKinney was slightly involved towards the collapse, or so to say. But this is a simple browser game which puts you in the shoes of a single parent who tries to make their ends meet with a child in the post-position economy. So after 2008, living life in US has become very difficult. And how difficult, we may not realize instantly, because this person may be involved in a temporary job or a part-time job or a minimum wage job. But the new definition of poverty in US after 2008 is that everybody who's poor may be able to afford an iPhone or HD TVs, but they may not be able to afford basic amenities like education or health or whatnot. So that's the new definition of poverty. And what's important there is that you're buying iPhones and you're buying HD TVs. And that's because of materialism. And who is it indirectly benefiting? The rich people, the rich corporates who end up benefiting from those sales. And indirectly, you're not able to save enough money because you're trapped in that vicious cycle of materialism. Documentary games are basically highly research-oriented games. The one on left is what I'm developing right now. It's based on the post-independence history of India and how, as people have evolved, they also, as the country has progressed over the last 60 years, how have the people's aspirations changed along with that? So I interviewed a variety of people from different age groups along to find out how they actually what their dreams and aspirations were back in the 60s, back in the 70s. And I put them in a single environment of the local trains. Now, local trains in India, or specifically in this case, Mumbai, is the only place where a CEO can be standing next to a beggar. And that's the kind of environment which I wanted to create, and that's what I hope to achieve with that kind of game. So I think initially, while we try to realize that these issues are really important to our world, we should also try to think from the basic industry perspective. Now, games, we love games, but we often lament on the fact that games are not taken seriously by non-gamers compared to, say, films or novels. So how do we make people take games seriously? And the only solution to that is diversify. We may be making a lot of fun games, you may be making a lot of entertaining games, a lot of good story-based games, but if we make games that actually have a kind of impact on real world, no matter how big or small that impact is, it can actually really help people. And this democratization of game development is a really key movement to that. Nowadays, unlike back what it was in the 90s, only people who studied computer science or animation could actually make games. Now it's not the case, because you have tools like Construct, which allows you to create games without even using a single line of code. And you have middleware like Unity 3D, which allows you to just know about a specific part of development and have assets or asset stores handle that particular aspect. So make games about real-world issues, and educate yourself not just about the world around you, but also how it impacts people in different ways, because empathy is something which cannot be really easily achieved. So if you have any questions, I would gladly answer them.
We won't have time for questions, so you would have to answer them outside.
All right, no problem. Again, thank you so much for attending this, because I know it's a really offbeat, black sheep of a topic to have in this kind of conference, but I'm really glad that I have found an audience for it, so thank you very much for attending.
Thank you.